In this web tutorial, I'm going to show you how to interact with C# data types and calculations. Right now I'm in the course documents and I want to open up this sample project which I've put out here for you. So in Mozilla Firefox, I'm right-clicking and I'm going to save it to where I store my C# projects. My documents, Visual Studio 2012 projects. Okay, I'm going to go to my download manager. I'm going to right-click and say Open Containing Folder. And there it is. I right-click and I say Extract here. And you can see right here it created the project. Unzipped it. I double-click and I open up the solution file. In Windows, you may have hidden file types. The .sln may not show up, but over here in the type, you will see it says Microsoft Visual Studio Solution. So double-click that. Visual Studio will open up, and here we are. The project opens up, and you should see your Solution Explorer, your property window, and your toolbox. I'm going to pin my toolbox, so it goes right there. If you do not see these things, try going to View and making sure you have the Solution Explorer checked in the toolbox. Or another thing you can do is go to Window, Reset Window Layout. I'm going to click on the form. Notice we put the FRM prefix. And here I got a form. See, it's from Chapter 4, Samples, page 101. This is the form. Here's all its properties. I also have in this project some buttons and a list output. This is called a list box. And notice I have different buttons. One for integers, one for decimals, one for char, one for clearing, and one for exiting. I'm going to show you the easiest buttons first. Let's click on the exit. Notice it's called button exit. I double click and the code window shows up and I'm in the button exit, which is what I named it, and click. So when you click on the button exit, this piece of code fires. Now I'm going to get back to design mode by either clicking here or I could double click on the form. Let's go look at the clear button. And notice I say list output .items.clear. That's telling C# to clear out all the items in the list output. And I put the focus. That means the blinking cursor goes on there. Let's get back to the design and let's go look at the integers. You will see a red dot here, and what I did in the button integer click is I put a breakpoint. How you get a breakpoint is if you go to debug and you see the F9, that's toggle breakpoint. A breakpoint is when the program's executing, it allows us to step through and see what the code's doing. Another way you can get a breakpoint to come on or off is click in this area here called the gutter. It's gone and it's back. So if you look, I declare an integer called x and I give it the value of 14. I declare an integer y and it's equal to 8 and do an integer I result equals 0. Notice I'm always declaring the integers or the variables of the integer type before I use them. So I put out to the list box in the items I add integer examples and I put what x is and what y is. This plus says put x equals colon space plus whatever the value of x is to the screen. Right here I add x plus y and put the answer into iResult. Then iResult goes out to the screen. And I show how to do subtraction, multiplication, and division. This is modules division, which is remainder division. And I show you what the negative sign does, and what a decrement does, and what an increment does. So I'm going to go back. Notice the program will stop here. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to run it. And this is nice, and you should get in the habit of using the breakpoints because it makes your life easier. So I'm going to click on the integers button, and notice the code has stopped right here in this window. Yellow means it's waiting for a response from me. If I hover, it will show me that x is equal to 0 because it stops before the line has executed. So if I go to debug and I hit F10, it will step me through the code. So right now I'm hitting F10 on my keyboard and see the yellow line is moving. This is the computer executing the instructions. So now if I hover on X, you can see that X became 14, Y got the value of 8, and I result equals 0. So as we step through the code, I can watch it execute. It took what was in X plus Y and put the answer here. So 14 plus 8 gets put into I result, which is 22, and puts off to the screen. So I keep hitting F10, I can watch the code execute in front of me. This will help you figure out what's going wrong with your code. If you don't wish to step through the code anymore, you come to debug. Notice F10 is step over the code, where F5 is continuing. So it just executes from here down. And you can see that all the instructions I had here got put up to the screen. So I'm going to hit clear. I am now ready to experiment and watch the decimal code execute. So I'm going to double click here. Notice I'm in button decimals click. So whenever I click on this button, this code will happen. So I'm going to put my first breakpoint right here. So remember, I can click here, right where my mouse is pointing, or I can hit the F9. I'm going to click right in this gray gutter. Okay, so that means when I click on this button when the program's running, and notice the program's not running, it will show me what it's doing. So I'm going to run the code. You can now tell the code is running because it's here in front of you, but see this icon here? That tells you it's running. So let's click on the decimals, and here I am. So remember, decimals are used for money. You can also have a float or a double. And do you remember what key I can hit to step through the code? If you don't remember, go to debug and do F10. That lets me watch each line as it executes. This is a great way to figure out what the code's doing. So at this point, the decimal A got a value of 8.5. You can see that right there. B got a value of 3.4. And dec result got a value of 0. So here, we're going to do some simple decimal math. So we had 8.5 and 3.4, and the answer gets put into D result 11.9. We put out into the list output in the items, we add this text, and we stick on the end whatever the value was. And let's step through and see how a minus works, and a division, and a multiplication, a modulus division, and the negative sign. I'm stepping through. A minus minus in front, well, let's talk here. A minus in front makes it a negative, and if it's a negative, it makes it a positive. A minus minus in front will take whatever's in there and subtract 1 from. A plus plus in front will take whatever's in B and add 1 to it. And I'm stepping through. Notice it hits the curly brace. There's no more code to execute. I hit F10 one more time, and there's my form. I'd like to go over the char button code now. So notice I'm going to double click there, and I'm going to put a breakpoint right here so I can watch what happens. You don't have to do the breakpoint, but I'm showing you how the calculations happen when you press on a button. Do you remember how to run the code? I can come up here and hit this button, or I can go to debug and hit this, or I can just hit F5. Okay. Now we're going to click on the char button. And what we're going to do is put one single character, any one character from the keyboard. So I'm going to put a capital C, and notice you enclose it with single quotes when you're giving it to a char. If you're dealing with a string, you have a double quote like here. So take a singular letter or character from the keyboard and put it into this variable called C letter 1, which is a char. And notice we declare a second character called C letter 2, which has nothing in it. So we step through the code, and how I do that, again, is keep pressing F10. I'm hitting F10. So right now, C letter 1 is the value of a C. So we're going to experiment and put out to the screen what the char examples are. Now you may ask what this code does. It puts a string out to the screen called C letter is, colon, space, and it tacks on the letter C at the end. Now this code right here may be a little perplexing to you, but what this does, it adds 1 to the letter C. And you may ask, how can I add 1 to a letter? What it's really doing is saying add 1 to C and give me the next letter in the alphabet. So we all know what comes after C, and the answer is D is put into here. Let me put that out to the screen. And let's run the code, and I'm out of debug, and there you go.